Good morning. Here begins Tape 1, Volume 1, in the videotape deposition of Sibel Edmonds, taken in the matter of Gene Schmidt versus David Krikorian in the Ohio State Elections Commission, case number 2009 E-003. Today's date is August 8th, 2009. The time on the video screen is 10:33 and 34 seconds. This deposition is being held in the offices of Stephen Cohn at 3238 P Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. The court reporter today is Chad Jackson. The video camera operator is Mia Marbury. Both are on behalf of Neil Gross reporting. Will counsel and others present please introduce themselves and state whom they represent?
Dan Marino here on behalf of Mr. Krikorian.
Could I interject an objection here? Is Mr. Marino admitted in this case to practice before the Ohio Elections Commission?
Okay.
What is the answer to that question, sir?
I'm sorry. Why don't you go ahead and identify yourself, David?
David Krikorian.
Do you want? Who's the next gentleman?
Phil Elwood. I work for GL, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to have everyone identify themselves.
Sure. Okay.
You're Mr.
I'm Mr.
Right?
Bruce Fine. I'm counsel for Gene Schmidt in this proceeding.
Okay.
I'm Michael Cohn with Cohn, and Colapinto, representing the witness Sibel Edmonds, and with me are three law clerks.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Will the court reporter please swear in the witness, after which we can begin?
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Edmonds. I introduced myself to you off the record. My name is Dan Marino. I represent Mr. Krikorian. I'm with the law firm of Lukey, Garagos, and Marino here in Washington, D.C.
Now, I'm going to interpose an objection to Mr. Marino asking the question because there's no showing that he's been authorized to participate in the proceeding at issue in this particular matter.
Okay. I want to thank you for coming this morning.
Does Mr. Marino do you have any proof that you've been admitted to practice in the proceeding before the Ohio Elections Commission in the case of Gene Schmidt versus David Krikorian?
Okay. I'd like to show you what's been marked.
I interpose a standing objection, and I will, to every single question Mr. Marino asks until he establishes and testifies or otherwise documents that he is authorized to participate in this proceeding, and that if he continues to do this, we will consider seeking sanctions, including the unauthorized practice of law in Ohio.
Okay. To show you what's been marked as Exhibit 1 to your deposition, I'm afraid I only have one copy of it. It purports to be a subpoena from the Ohio Elections Commission for your testimony today. Have you seen that before?
My attorney's office received it. I believe I have seen the PDF version of it.
Okay. And I take it that you're here in response to that subpoena today, correct?
Correct.
No, I interpose an objection again because the documentary evidence shows the Ohio Election Commission communicated to Mr. Marino that they had no intent of enforcing their subpoena beyond the territorial jurisdiction of Ohio, and that Ms. Edmonds was under no compulsion to attend today, and that is made abundantly clear, and that's a misstatement of the record made by Mr. Marino, and I highly object to that mischaracterization of why Ms. Edmonds is here today.
Let me clarify. Ms. Edmonds is here today with respect to that subpoena as a courtesy of rather than traveling to Ohio.
That is simply a misstatement of the record in this case, which made quite clear that the Ohio Elections Commission was not ordering Ms. Edmonds to appear, that the Justice Department also considered the subpoena that was issued to her here, and that if she wanted to come to Ohio and they wanted to issue a subpoena in Ohio, that's up to them. That is not what happened in this particular case. That is a misstatement of the record.
I guess you don't understand courtesy within the legal community.
You don't
but
understand
fine.
the documents that have been issued in this particular case. In particular, the document issued by Mr. Phil Richter, the counsel for the Ohio Election Commission, said there was no jurisdiction and they did not intend to enforce the subpoena in the District of Columbia, and that there was no compulsion on Ms. Edmonds to attend this deposition today.
Okay. Kind of makes you wish you went to law school, right? Yeah. I do want to thank you for coming today, Ms. Edmonds, and I did talk to your counsel before the deposition and asked him to communicate to you, and I'll tell you the same thing. I just became involved recently in this case, and I'm going to be asking you a series of questions about some about your background and some about some of the things that we've seen in the press and in connection with some of the issues we've had with the U.S. government, et cetera. And I do want to sort of advise you that until the last couple of days, I really have heard nothing about this case. And so some of my questions are going to seem somewhat elementary. And it's not because I'm playing Columbo or anything like that. It's just because I really don't know the information. So, and in a sense, I think that'll be good because what we're hoping to do with your testimony is provide some education to the folks involved in this. And so in the process of educating me, maybe you'll be educating some of the listeners, people who will see the deposition testimony. Have you had your deposition taken before?
In business, maybe.
Okay. Then you understand the process. As I said, I'm going to be asking a series of questions, and I'm just going to ask you to answer them to the best of your ability. You'll maybe see objections from people from time to time, and unless someone tells you not to answer the question, it's okay to go ahead and answer it. Okay. And of course, you can take your guidance from your counsel on when to answer a question, when not to. If at any time you want to stop, take a break, talk to your lawyer, get a drink of water, whatever, just let us know, and we'll be happy to accommodate that. I'd like to start, if we could, with just a little bit of your background, just for the record. I understand from some of the reading I did that you, I think, were born in Iran. Is that correct?
Correct.
I object. This is the standard that Chris Finney asserted in Mr. Krikorian's deposition when a question was raised this follows to Mr. Krikorian, and I'm reading from the transcript of his deposition, page 9. Are you a lifetime Cincinnati area resident, or did you move here at some point? Mr. Krikorian's attorney, Mr. Finney. Objection. What does this have to do with the case? And the statement that we agreed to with Mr. Finney, that unless there's a particular question that goes to the allegations of falsehood and intentional falsehoods in this case, it is off limits. That's the standard that Chris Finney, counsel for Mr. Krikorian, established in his deposition, and it applies here in the same way. Whether she was born in Iran has nothing to do with the allegations that I can see that Gene Schmidt has lodged against Mr. Krikorian, and unless there's some demonstration of some relevance, then I object to answering that question the same way that Mr. Finney objected to Mr. Krikorian answering whether he was a lifetime Cincinnati resident.
Okay. I think you answered that, yes, you were born in Iran, and then you ultimately moved to Turkey at some point? Is that correct?
Correct. Because
And I also
was
have a
always
standing
Turkish
objection
citizen.
on relevance for the same reasons.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the answer.
Yes, because I was always a Turkish citizen because my parents were Turkish. So we were there because of my father's job, and then we moved back to Turkey.
All right. And I understand you speak a number of languages, in addition to English, correct?
Correct.
What are those languages?
Turkish is my mother language.
Okay.
After that, Farsi, that's the language spoken in Iran.
Okay.
And I also have conversational abilities in Azerbaijani.
I'll just interpose a standing objection so we can move along on relevance grounds that I don't believe that there's been any establishment that the witness knows anything about the allegations in the complaint. So just to speed things along, I'll have a standing objection on relevance to every single question asked until there's some connection between her knowledge of the complaint and the question that relates to the facts in the complaint.
And at some point, you moved to the United States?
Correct.
And when was that?
1988, July 1988.
All right. And can you just tell us about your educational background, please?
Sure. I have a master's degree in public policy from George Mason University. I have bachelor's degrees in psychology and in criminal justice from George Washington University. I have a AS degree from Northern Virginia Community College in biology. And I finished high school in Turkey. I graduated in 1988 in Istanbul.
And I understand, again, just to move things along a little quickly, that at some point you became a contract employee with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when was that?
I started working for the FBI on around September 15, 2001.
And when you became employed at the FBI, did you receive a top secret security clearance?
Yes, I did.
And how did it come to be that you were working for the FBI?
Okay, I will try to summarize the story so it won't take too long. When I was studying for my bachelor's degree, criminal justice and psychology, I had applied for internship position with the FBI, and this would be around 1997, 1998. And they never responded to me, and except that they were interested in my linguistic abilities because I spoke Turkish and Farsi. And then I didn't hear back from them, and I was contacted around September 11, 2001, and they said they had obtained top secret clearance for me, and they needed my services for translation in Turkish and Farsi. And they wanted me to start immediately, and because I couldn't work full-time, I took the contractor's position with the FBI for translation of those languages, and to a certain degree Azerbaijani.
All right. And so can you describe what your job was with the FBI, and aside from translating those languages?
I assisted special agents, both the primary supervisory special agents in Washington, D.C. field office, but also special agents in charge of various counterintelligence and counterterrorism investigations around the country, and those were different FBI field offices.
Okay. Now, when you refer to counterintelligence operations, can you just tell us what that means?
Counterintelligence operations in the FBI had to do with collecting information, monitoring particular target foreign entities in the United States.
And just to, I'm probably oversimplifying it, but it's sort of a matter of public record that the FBI may have people who listen to telephone conversations, other types of intercepted conversations that are in foreign languages.
Leading question.
And they have translators who translate those. Correct?
Objection leading.
Information could have been both conversational audio, but also documents, written documents, or in certain cases, direct surveillance.
And for the record, I'd just like to note that I've asked the witness to limit her responses only to the information that she believes to be publicly available, or she's learned from sources outside of her employment. So I just want that on the record.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I have had in the past the chance to work with intelligence officers in these kinds of cases, and I realize that you can't get into sources and methods and so forth, and if I'm straying into that area in any way, just let me know and I'll back off. It is a matter of public record, however, that our government, through the FBI primarily, does do counterintelligence work with respect to foreign nationals and foreign organizations, correct?
Correct.
And those would include Turkish organizations?
Correct.
And my understanding is that you were terminated by the FBI, or at least your contract was terminated in, is it March or April of 2002?
April 2002, correct.
And so from September of 2001 until April of 2002, you were engaged in this activity of listening to and translating documents and conversational audio, correct?
Correct.
And again, these were materials that were related to counterintelligence operations, correct?
Not limited to counterintelligence. Some of them cross-border criminal related investigations,
okay. And
also I also translated for counterterrorism division.
Okay. So all three of those?
Correct.
Okay. Now, and I take it that you were translating, obviously, the languages that you were fluent in, correct? Turkish, Farsi.
Although initially I performed translation for all 3 languages, but within a few weeks, because of the need in the FBI, urgent need, I was placed primarily on Turkish, and that became my main language that I used to work for the FBI.
So, again, I know it sounds elementary, but just by way of background, you were translating documents and conversations that were created by and spoken by people who spoke Turkish, correct?
Correct. But because the targets could also speak English, and this couldn't have been known to the FBI agents until I first went through the information, I also had to transcribe and make notes of pertinent pieces of conversation in English also. So I had to listen to a lot of English conversation and notify my bosses in the FBI of the ones that were important.
Okay. Now, let me jump ahead to April of 2002, and you said your contract was terminated by the FBI. Can you tell us why that happened?
After I was hired by the FBI in September 2001, about a month or so later, FBI hired another language specialist for a Turkish division in the FBI's Washington field office. And a few weeks after this person, Melek Can Dickerson, M-E-L-E-K, middle name C-A-N, last name Dickerson, D-I-C-K-E-R-S-O-N. And she also had top security clearance. My main primary agent for Turkish counterintelligence and we, through various evidence and incidents, became aware that she had worked for certain Turkish organizations and entities that were directly the targets of FBI counterintelligence investigations, and that she had lied in her application, and that for unknown reasons to us, I don't know why, the FBI security background check had not caught that important information despite even her tax filing records. And not only that, Melek Can Dickerson and her husband, at the time he was a major with the Defense Intelligence Agency, Major Douglas Dickerson, and he was working for Douglas Feit's office and was a coordinator with the State Department on the Turkic republics in Central Asia. Both husband and wife, Melek Can Dickerson and her husband, they were still associating and had working relationships with these Turkish entities, individuals, and organizations that were the targets of FBI investigations. As we started reporting this to our superiors, initially there was a panic in the department, but as it went up further to the headquarters, this is the FBI headquarters, the FBI headquarters started retaliating against me. And eventually they terminated my contractor. And there is an Inspector General's report available publicly that came out, I believe, in 2005 that confirmed all my allegation and the fact that FBI fired me simply due to my activities in whistleblowing in making this known to the FBI and later to the Congress, and that the evidence on the translator in question was supported by other witnesses from the FBI and documents. So that's a public documents report.
Right. There's an unclassified version of that report which has been made public, correct?
Correct.
And that report basically substantiated the allegations that you were making regarding Ms. Dickerson.
Correct.
And the concerns that you had regarding Ms. Dickerson pertain to espionage, really, right?
Correct.
And that was in part because of the fact that she was associated with these, she and her husband were associated with these targets of counterintelligence operations,
Correct.
who were Turkish entities, organizations. Is that correct?
Yes, and certain U.S. entities who were also part of these espionage-related operations.
Was one of the organizations that you were concerned about the American Turkish Council?
Yes.
Were there others?
Yes.
Can you identify them, please?
Certain Turkish diplomatic community in Washington, D.C. and other locations, and other Turkish cultural and business-related associations and lobbying groups with various chapters in various cities and states in the United States.
All right. Without asking you specifically who the targets were at this point, when you hear the term, well, have you ever heard the term Turkish lobby?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Can you be more specific? It means many things to me.
I mean, just what comes to mind when you again, I came into this a couple of days ago. I've seen the term Turkish lobby, see people referring to it. If someone uses that term, can you tell us either generally or specifically what it means to you?
Correct. It means two sets of things. One set is the overt Turkish lobby, that is classic lobbying for business interests, governmental relationship interests, commerce, etc. And the other category is the covert activities and operations by the lobby that many of which may not be legal.
Okay. And when we talk about the overt Turkish lobby, can you identify the organizations you're thinking of there?
There are so many. American Turkish Council is the primary organization, which is directly works with the diplomatic community in the United States, Turkish diplomatic community, that is. ATAA with another umbrella under which there are various locations and chapters, such as ATA Chicago, ATA Paterson, New Jersey, ATA DC, and also some that are identified as cultural, such as TAKA, Turkish American Cultural Association. There are hundreds of small chapters, and I don't know some of these, but the main ones would be American Turkish Council, ATAA, ATA and its various chapters throughout the country in the United States, TAKA, Turkish American Business Association is another primary one.
About ATA, is that the Assembly of Turkish America Associations?
I believe that's what it stands for.
How about, have you heard of the Turkish Coalition of America?
Just through some cursory reading recently.
Okay. And if familiar with an organization called the Turkish American Legal Defense Fund?
I don't recall.
Okay. Have you ever met Mr. Fine before, who's present here today?
I haven't met him personally, no.
Okay. You aware of the fact that he's associated with the Turkish American Legal Defense Fund?
I didn't know that.
Okay. The organizations you identified just now were, I think you identified as, the ones you identified, not the ones I asked you about, but the ones you identified, I think you were listing as part of the overt Turkish lobby, correct?
Okay, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was asking about what is meant by the Turkish lobby, and you said that there are overt forms of the Turkish lobby and there are covert forms. Right? The organizations we were talking about, are they part of the overt Turkish lobby, if you will?
They are part of both overt and covert.
Okay. So when you talk about the covert Turkish lobby, what are you referring to there?
Activities that would involve trying to obtain very sensitive, classified, highly classified U.S. intelligence information, weapons technology information, classified congressional records, recruiting key U.S. individuals with access to highly sensitive information, blackmailing, bribery. These are some of the ones that just pops, and there are many others that I may be able to think of.
Well, by way of example, I think you indicated that Ms. Dickerson, by the way, is she ever referred to as Jan Dickerson?
Correct. That's how she went at the FBI, and as far as I know, elsewhere she used her middle name in the United States, Jan Dickerson.
Now, I read in some of the reports about an incident where Ms. Dickerson showed up at your home unexpectedly on Sunday.
Correct.
And can you tell us what happened when she arrived there?
Sure. She came to my house with her husband, who at the time was Major Douglas Dickerson. And he identified himself first as the officer for Air Force, but later said that his real task was operations involving weapons procurements by countries in Central Asia and Turkey, and that he directly worked with Douglas Veit and Paul Wolfowitz.
Yeah.
At the time, this would be 2001 December.
Right. And they came to your home on Sunday morning?
Yes,
right?
social visit, they said.
And during that discussion, during that visit, did you come to believe that Ms. Dickerson was recruiting you?
Yes, I did.
For what?
They wanted me to join the American Turkish Council, and they told me that I would be provided with many benefits, both monetary but also prestigious benefits, if I were to enroll with them.
Okay. And did you know at the time that the American Turkish Council was one of the counterintelligence targets?
Absolutely, yes.
And did you believe Ms. Dickerson knew that as well?
Yes, and the fact because her husband associated with American Turkish Council and she worked for them.
And did you report this effort to recruit you to your superiors?
Immediately. The next day, I reported it in writing to my direct administrative supervisor, and a few days later to my agent, who was my supervisory agent, but also again in writing to the FBI's personnel security office, because I was obligated for my top secret clearance to report recruitment attempts.
Okay. Now, why, if you can tell me, why would the American Turkish Council be a counterintelligence target?
Certain individuals from that organization, American Turkish Council, certain individuals were involved with other individuals outside American Turkish Council, which includes diplomatic community and Turkish diplomatic community, and other sub-chapter organizations. I say sub-chapter because even though it's not known, ATA is not formally known as American Turkish Council's sub-chapter, but they do a lot of activities through ATA in various cities and states in the United States. And those individuals were involved in operations that were counterintelligence related, and not if they were against the United States interest and security.
Okay. Was there, make sure I have this correct, was there a particular individual at the American Turkish Council who had connections to the Turkish embassy in Washington at that time?
There were several people there.
And again, just because I don't know, to your knowledge, was the American Turkish Council an organization that was supported by the Turkish government?
I don't know directly, but indirectly,
Yeah,
yes.
conjecture,
I mean-
object, only speak based upon your personal knowledge, conjecture and speculation otherwise. I move to strike your answer unless it's based upon personal knowledge.
And
Based on-
you can answer the question. just
Based
as I
on my
asked it.
personal knowledge, they were indirectly supporting it. Turkish government was indirectly supporting the American Turkish Council. Certain individuals and operations and projects that, yes.
Okay, and how were they supplying that support?
Without getting into specifics, it's hard to explain. They could arrange for intermediary business individuals to make payments for certain activities, lobbying activities, or intelligence gathering activities, or activities involved in weapon procurement deals between Turkey and the United States.
So one of the basic means of support would be money, correct?
Money when they could, yes.
So if I said that the American Turkish Council, for example, was an organization supported by the Turkish government, that wouldn't be an unreasonable assumption.
Correct. It would have been.
What about some of these other members of the Turkish lobby that we've talked about? Would I be unreasonable in assuming that those organizations might be receiving support from the Turkish government?
They were all receiving, the ones that I knew of, yes, directly.
The question was, can I just clarify for my own mind? The question was based upon the witness's personal knowledge. She knows that all the other organizations that were targets, they were receiving money from the government of Turkey. Is that the question and answer?
You know, Mr. Fine's going to have an opportunity, I think, to ask some questions when I'm finished. But right now, you and I will just have questions and answers. So what happened when you reported to your superiors at the FBI that Ms. Dickerson was trying to recruit you for this organization, American Turkish Council?
At the initial stage, this is for Washington field office, before it went all the way up to the FBI headquarters, there was a climate of panic. The agent I worked with, Special Agent Dennis Sasher, informed the counter-espionage section, department in the FBI, wrote a letter to the FBI headquarters, and he also asked for an immediate damage assessment because some of our FBI's counterintelligence primary targets, the targets were graded in different, they had different grades. Some primary targets were the ones that Ms. Dickerson was working with closely, and she and her husband associating. So that was the initial response.
Okay. And ultimately, did they take any action against Ms. Dickerson or her husband?
Again, initially, during this initial stage, I believe they asked her to take polygraph, and they also, the FBI's counter-espionage unit, they set up the date and time to have some kind of an interrogation. They called it the surprise interrogation session with her that they set up, but they were prevented from pursuing it later.
Okay. And they also had you take a polygraph test, right?
Correct.
And the polygraph examiners found that you were not deceptive.
Yes,
right?
I was absolutely truthful.
Right. Now, in your experience, both at the FBI and since then, what is it that the Turkish lobby, what kinds of issues are they traditionally concerned about in our country?
Various issues that I'm aware of. Some, the more overt ones, the foreign policy of the United States. Another, the weapon procurement from the United States and the military aid. And political front is the being able to secure grants from United States Congress for their operations, or some of them joint operations in Central Asia and Middle East. The front companies for construction or road building, etc., and to be able to secure these grants from Congress for those front organizations. Armenian genocide and preventing that from ever being brought up or passing Congress or even discussed in the mainstream media is another political objectives that they pursue very strongly. These are the overt ones. So these are the overt ones.
All right. In your experience, then these are issues that the Turkish government is concerned about?
Not only, yes, Turkish government is concerned, but also other entities with their own special interests who are very concerned about these issues.
Okay. Can you identify those?
Some of them are business entities. The others are more like clusters of criminal gangs would be the best way to describe them.
Oh.
That may or may not be independent from the central government.
You mentioned the Armenian genocide issues. My understanding is that there have been resolutions proposed, introduced, discussed in Congress to recognize the Armenian genocide, correct?
Correct.
And those have been controversial resolutions over the years.
Correct.
And so when you refer to this Turkish lobby regarding that as an issue, it would be their intent to prevent such a resolution from being passed by the U.S. Congress, correct?
Correct.
Now, am I correct that, I know you don't work for the FBI now, but would you consider yourself sort of still involved in some of the issues that we've been discussing?
Somewhat, yes.
Right. Do you, am I correct that you have a blog on the internet?
Yes.
And you post material on that?
Yes.
One of the things that I saw on your blog is something called a State Secrets Privilege Gallery. You know what I'm referring to?
That is on my personal website that is public, justacitizen.com, correct.
Okay. And when you talk about the State Secrets Privilege, I think I know what you mean by that. Can you tell us what you're referring to?
State secrets privilege is this arcane executive privilege that the government, United States government, invoked in my case twice in order to quash my court case, but also prevent the public knowledge of information I reported to Congress, to the Inspector General's office, and to the FBI and the Justice Department itself. And basically it acts as a gag order, and the only justification the U.S. government provided for it was she may be right with whatever she knows and she believes is important and crucial, but because the information she has may threaten and affect certain U.S. diplomatic relations and national security, we are asking the courts and the Congress to consider these as executive privilege called state secrets privilege.
Okay. And just to bring me up to date, you filed a lawsuit against the government at some point, correct?
Correct.
And that was because of your termination by the FBI, right?
And my First Amendment rights, correct.
And if I understand it correctly, the government used the state secrets privilege to get that lawsuit thrown out.
The first invocation, yes.
Okay. Was there a second invocation?
Yes, my deposition was subpoenaed by a law firm called Motley Rice. I think it's Motley, separate word RICE, who represented thousands of 9/11 victims' family members. And they subpoenaed my deposition. And I believe this was in 2004. That was when the government, FBI, and the Justice Department went to the judge who was sitting on my case and asked him to quash it based on state secrets privilege, and they cited the state secrets privilege together with affidavits from the various individuals in the Justice Department, including the Attorney General, and asked the judge to quash that deposition for the second time.
So these were lawyers who were representing the families of the 9/11 victims, correct? Wanted to get information from you?
The lawyers of the family victims, yes, victims' family, correct.
And did you understand why they thought you had relevant information?
Macro level, yes. I didn't know what they were planning to ask specifically, but it had to do with certain Turkish lobby and organizations in the United States who also had certain dealings with Saudi Arabia-related financial and lobby organizations in the United States, and cases that would have involved both Saudi Arabia and Turkey jointly working, doing certain things here in the United States, but also outside the United States.
Okay. And I think you said earlier, basically the government prevented you from giving that information to the families of the 9/11 victims, correct?
Correct. It's been 5 years, but to my best of knowledge, they forced the party who was subpoenaing me to submit questions, and they said all those questions are classified and covered by the state secrets privilege, and they invoked it. Correct.
Okay. Now, on that website, in this state secrets privileged gallery, it seems like you have photographs of various individuals, right?
Yes.
Is Dan Burton one of the people who's in the gallery?
His pictures is there, yes.
Okay. Why is his picture there?
I can't discuss the details of those individuals' not legal activities in the United States, but those pictures, his and others, are there because state secrets privilege was mainly invoked to cover up those individuals' illegal, extremely illegal activities against the United States citizens who were involved in operations that were, again, for the foreign governments and foreign entities against the United States interests.
Okay. And Dan Burton is the representative member of Congress from Indiana, is that correct? Is that the right place?
I believe he is.
Okay. What about, it also appears that you have a photograph of Dennis Hastert in the gallery?
Yes.
Okay, and why is his photograph there?
Again, this information is public, has been public. It's, he would be one of the primary U.S. persons involved in operations and activities that are not legal, and they're not for the interest of the United States, but for the interest of foreign governments and foreign entities.
Okay. Yeah, and again, Mr. Hastert was the Speaker of the House and representative from Illinois.
At the time, he was.
Can you tell me anything about what your concerns are about Mr. Hastert?
This information has been public. The concerns, again, would be in several categories. The acceptance of large sums of bribery in forms of cash or laundered cash, and laundering it to make it look legal for his campaigns and also for his personal use, in order to do certain favors and call for certain actions and make certain things happen for foreign entities and foreign governments' interest, the Turkish government's interest and Turkish business entities' interests.
Did you have reason to believe that Mr. Hastert, for example, killed one of the Armenian genocide resolutions in exchange for
Leading
money
question.
money from these Turkish organizations?
Yes, I do.
So if I were to say that a member of Congress, if I were just to walk out on the street and say, I think members of Congress have taken money from these Turkish organizations in exchange for denying the Armenian genocide, would that be an unreasonable assumption on my
That's
part?
pure conjecture. The individual is a totally
It wouldn't be.
irrelevant object.
Are you aware of other members of Congress other than Mr. Hastert taking money from Turkish organizations in exchange for denying the Armenian genocide?
Yes, and not only taking monies, but other activities too, including being blackmailed for various reasons.
Stephen Solars is on in your gallery as well. I believe he's a representative from New York. Is that correct? I'm really guessing.
He used to be.
Was. Right.
Correct. He is a registered lobbyist for the was a registered lobbyist for the government of Turkey.
And Mr. Hastert is also a registered lobbyist for the government of Turkey now.
That's what I have read, and it was announced. Yes, he is.
And why is Mr. Solars in your gallery? If you can tell me. Bless you.
Bless you. Mr. Solars and certain others in the gallery, as lobbyists, they also acted as conduits to deliver or launder contribution and other briberies to certain members of Congress, but also in pressuring outside Congress, including blackmail in certain members of Congress.
And Mr. Solars and others would be doing this on behalf of these Turkish organizations?
And the Turkish government, correct, both.
Would you say that, would it be your opinion that the Turkish government, through these Turkish organizations in the United States and otherwise, has corrupted members of Congress?
Objection. She's just asking for an opinion. This is supposed to be a witness who testifies to facts.
Absolutely, yes.
And is that based on you just speculating, or is it based on something else?
Based on documented and provable facts and files, and based on facts, 100%, and documented facts.
Now, and are some of those documented facts that you're referring to, are they public knowledge? Are they in the public domain, in other words?
Some of them through various, reporting and other sources who have been disturbed and talked, yes.
And is your opinion based in part upon your experience working on counterintelligence matters for the United States?
To the extent she can answer that question without... why don't we just withdraw that question?
Okay, that's fair enough. It looks like you have a photo of Bob Livingston on your gallery as well.
Yes.
And I believe he was a congressman from, I want to say Louisiana at some point.
Correct.
He was the one that was going to be the speaker, but then left.
Yes.
Why is he in your gallery?
Until 1999, until he left, for activities that he was engaged, not very legal activities on behalf of foreign interests and entities, and after 1999, acting as a conduit to, again, further foreign interests, both overtly and covertly, as a lobbyist, but also as an operative.
When you say as an operative, what do you mean by that?
In order to explain, I will give you an example, maybe? Is that okay?
Sure.
Just a hypothetical example? Or
It's okay with me. Yeah.
okay, if an individual has companies set up and clients in offshore islands like Cayman Islands, for example, and is able to, as an operative, to launder money by foreign entities that were obtained illegally, and some of them had to do with narcotics, and use these Cayman Islands offshore accounts to do that, and then some of that money goes to the congressional people. I would call that not overt, I would call that covert operations, covert operations for that person, rather than the classic lobbying operation.
All right, we've been going for about 55 minutes. Why don't we take a break, 10-minute break, and rest the fingers.
Going off the record, the time on the video screen is 11:23 and 57 seconds.